Around 4000 BCE, in the fertile lands of Mesopotamia, the human story shifted. Instead of roaming the earth as hunter-gatherers, the citizens of cities like Uruk settled to harvest cereal grains. They crushed wheat and barley between stones to make flour, an innovation that anchored humanity to the dirt. This transition took an immediate visible toll on the human body. Because early farmers worked grueling hours on a much less diverse diet, the average height of men dropped from 5'9" to 5'3". Women shrank from 5'3" to just 5 feet. The athletic superathletes of the past were replaced by shorter, overworked farmers. Being tied to the crops created a permanent structural consequence. If you can't leave your land, you can be controlled. This generated a rigid social hierarchy, a massive base of peasant laborers producing all the food, bearing the crushing weight of a tiny elite who claimed ownership over the land. Once that structure formed, it locked in. For the next several thousand years, from the shores of the Nile to the valleys of China, this exact power dynamic became the default setting for human life. If this towering structure defined the vast majority of our history, how did everyday people eventually dismantle the rule of god kings to build a world based on individual rights? Early empires perfected this control by treating their rulers as literal deities. In Egypt, pharaohs reigned as immortal spirits who bridged the gap between the living world and the afterlife. To ensure they were worshipped forever, they directed the grueling labor of thousands to build mountains of stone, consuming entire economies for a single spirit. This inequality was officially written into the law. In ancient Babylon, King Hammurabi ordered the creation of a massive stone slab, recording 282 specific rules for his citizens, laws that he claimed were handed down by the gods themselves. These laws enforced a world of different values. Under Hammurabi's cone, if a noble destroyed the eye of another noble, his own eye was destroyed. But if he destroyed a slave's eye, he simply paid a fine. The physical body of an elite was legally worth more than a laborer. There were brief experiments with sharing power, like the democracy of ancient Athens, where citizens were selected randomly to serve in the government. But these systems were often viewed as chaotic and barbaric by the very philosophers who lived within them. Instead, the world belonged to conquerors like Alexander the Great and Julius Caesar, who crossed the Rubicon and forced the Roman Senate to name him dictator for life. They redrew the map of the world, but for the average person, the shifting borders didn't matter. The role of the peasant at the bottom remained the same. For millennia, the combination of overwhelming military might, unquestioned divine right, and strict class-based laws created a perfectly sealed cage. But a structure that rigid is bound to build up pressure. Eventually, the seemingly invincible pyramid suffered 3 catastrophic structural failures. The first was a legal fracture. In 1215, King John of England faced a rebellion from his barons. To keep his crown, he was forced to negotiate a settlement and sign the Magna Carta. This document established the radical precedent that even a monarch is subject to the rule of law, creating a codified limit on absolute power for the first time in the West. Next came an economic fracture. In the 1300s, the bubonic plague wiped out a massive percentage of the global population, with death tolls reaching as high as 200 million people. This chart shows how the sudden drop in population completely flipped the economic scale. With the labor supply at an all-time low, the surviving peasants gained unprecedented leverage. Landowners had no choice but to offer higher wages and more rights just to keep their fields from going fallow. Finally, there was an ideological fracture. In 1517, Martin Luther challenged the absolute monopoly of the Catholic Church. By successfully protesting the established order, he proved that individuals could question the ultimate authorities of their era: law, economics, and religion. These 3 shifts proved that the apex of the pyramid was no longer invincible, providing the base with the leverage it needed to push back. By the 18th century, traditional autocracies were still expanding. The Ottoman Empire presided over a vast territory stretching from Europe to the deserts of Arabia, using its immense wealth and influence to maintain the status quo. In the Americas, this imperial expansion collided with indigenous civilizations like the Aztecs. These complex societies were swallowed up by European powers, who used superior technology to claim the wealth of a continent for their own monarchs. But despite this expansion, the intellectual framework of the world had shifted. People at the bottom of the pyramid were beginning to read, question, and demand autonomy over their own lives. The tension finally reached a breaking point in Philadelphia in the summer of 1776. The Declaration of Independence served as a formal rejection of the pharaonic god-kings, the unequal laws of Babylon, and the mandate of heaven. By stating all men are created equal, it placed the individual at the center of the political world. These fractures eventually transformed the relationship between the state and the individual. While the social pyramid defined human existence for 6,000 years, these cumulative shifts forged a new reality, one where the state is designed to serve the citizen rather than the other way around.